Good Monday afternoon to you. Hope you're having a great day. Thanks for joining us on Sports4CLE. Plenty of Browns to talk about, coming off a tough one out on the West Coast. Lost to the Chargers. Browns fans, relax. It'll be okay. Honest, it'll be okay. Tim Bielek from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com will join us. But before we get to Tim and Scott Petrak from the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, Kevin Stefanski addressed the media today and again talked about a tough one as the Browns score 42 points but come up on the wrong end against the Chargers.
Obviously, very disappointed. You go on the road against a good team. You want to come away with victory, and we didn't. And I told the team there's 1,000 reasons why we didn't. We got to make sure we own them and get to the bottom of them, and because we have to be better. We'll be in similar games against similar opponents, and we got to come through. And I certainly have to do my part there as well. So disappointed. Going to have to make some corrections, and then got an undefeated Arizona Cardinals team coming into our place this weekend. So we're going to have to, again, make corrections and then quickly move on.
Let's welcome in Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter from the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram. You can also read him on brownzone.com. Scott, takeaways from this one. It was tough to watch that.
Yeah, it was. I mean, not the offense early, right? Score 42 points. But the fact that you score 42 and don't win, it's a really tough one to take, because that was a game obviously they could have won. It's a good opponent on the road. Could have positioned yourself at the top of the North and really at the top of the AFC, and this one got away.
When you look at just how the defense played, a little surprised. I mean, coming off combined, what they give up, 13 points the last 2 weeks. Justin Herbert looked really good.
Yeah, I'm surprised that it was 47 points. I thought it'd be higher scoring than the previous 2 weeks, just because I think Justin Herbert is that good, and the Chargers have a bunch of playmakers around him: Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, who we saw show up a bunch yesterday. So I thought, it'd be upper 20s. I did not think both teams would get into the 40s. And, there's reasons for that. You can look at the two big breakdowns on those Mike Williams, 72 and 42-yard touchdowns. Those are huge plays, and those mistakes didn't happen the previous 2 weeks. You look at injuries, no Jadeveon Clowney from the start. Denzel Ward gets hurt. Greedy gets hurt at some point. And that's an explanation for some of it too. But it's also just a step back. The defense did not execute at nearly the same level that it had the previous 2 weeks.
All right, so we mentioned how well the Browns offense did. Jake Trotter tweeted this out, and it's kind of interesting. Browns are the first team in NFL history to score 40-plus points, 500 yards of offense, no turnovers, and lose the football game. So again, that just shows you how strange of a game that was. Hasn't ever happened before, and there are some positives to what went on.
Oh, for sure. When you score that many points, when you don't turn it over, when you move the ball up and down the field, they ran for 220. All those things are really positive. I thought Baker Mayfield bounced back from that game against the Vikings, where he did not, completed under 50% of his passes. He was way more accurate yesterday. But also, you say all those positives, and then it kind of stings even more when you can't turn that into a victory. And you led by 14 points, in the third quarter, and you had the Chargers facing a bunch of fourth downs and couldn't get off the field. So, it's a crazy stat. It probably means that when you score that many points and put up that much yardage, you always win. But the NFL game's changing. We see a lot more of these games in the 40s. And, the Browns just didn't make enough plays on defense. I think they had one turnover. Maybe if you get a second turnover, then that changes it just enough. You can get out of there with 42 points and win the game.
So we already mentioned, they gave up a bunch of points. You referenced two big plays. They were blown coverages. John Johnson, the safety, the guy the Browns kind of brought in to oversee that back half, talked about those big plays and what went on with them.
We just had some busts, guys. We weren't really doing our job. We probably, the first half of the snap, we thought we were doing our job. The play kind of went on. Those were long plays, and I feel like we just didn't get our depth and finish the play. And like you said, guys were just wide open. So we got to get on the tape and make some changes and fix the stuff like that.
Mike Williams had 2 deep touchdowns off those. And the first one was Grant and A.J. Green, obviously, a miscommunication. The second one, nobody was there. You threw your hands in the air. What happened on that one? What was supposed to happen?
It was a split safety concept, and there's supposed to be somebody back there between the corner and the safety. And I feel like we just had 2 guys on a shallow route, and that was like a deep route. So it kind of just was a bust. And I didn't even, usually I check to make sure I got a guy just in case I got to squeeze it. But I kind of like trusted that somebody would be there. And I don't know what happened. I got to get on the tape. But, in split safety, it's supposed to be somebody back there. So we just got to get on the tape and fix it. You
guys have been playing so well on defense heading into this. How do you kind of explain like some of the breakdowns like you're talking about now?
It's hard to explain. I mean, those plays are plays that we make in our sleep just from guys being there. It's not like, it was 50-50 balls, and it's just like bust, like real complete bust. So, I mean, it's hard to explain. You just got to go to the tape and just see where we went wrong and trust our technique and move on from it.
And, Scott, when you look at it, you alluded to it, sometimes there were the 4th and 5th corners that are playing. When you literally talk about it, Greg Newsome's out, so your second corner's out. I think Denzel Ward played 12 snaps. Greedy Williams had to leave. That brings you down to your 4th and 5th cornerbacks.
Yeah, it does. And I think that explained some of the success Justin Herbert had. It made it easier for him. But when you look at those 2 busted plays that John Johnson III was just talking about, I don't blame the corners on either of those. Grant Delpit, it felt like he went down on that first one. A.J. Green was expecting safety help, and Delpit took the under route and let him run free. I think that was a Delpit mistake. And then the second one that Johnson said it's a split safety coverage. He thought Ronnie Harrison was going to be deep on the defensive right side of the field. And instead, Harrison kind of came up for a guy running a crossing route. And Johnson, you could tell that he expected somebody to be there because the way he was playing Mike Williams, his leverage was all forcing him that way. Like he was worried about him running to the other corner, and instead he cuts across the field. So, Harrison is a starter. Delpit's playing a bunch, and those safeties have been out there together. So for it to break down then, I can't blame the injuries. I just blame those guys and a lack of communication, but it sure bit them.
Yeah, and when you say those 3 names in context with them, communication at this point, week 5 shouldn't really be an issue. If it is, there's going to be some other things that they need to work through. Kevin Stefanski, again, addressed that very issue of the blown coverages. Here's what Kevin Stefanski had to say earlier today.
Well, obviously, when guys get that open, the answer is it's always a miscommunication, and that's what happened. We had poor communication out there a couple times. We got to get lined up, get the calls, and execute the defense. And unfortunately, you never know when it's going to hurt you. And it was unfortunate that we had some miscommunication back there, and we got to work real hard to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, and that's something we didn't see much of. Even against Kansas City, you didn't see the completely blown coverages like you did twice in that game.
Yeah, not like that. I think there might have been a couple smaller ones. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, miscommunication, every coach and every player says that now. It's become kind of what you throw out as an explanation. And I'm not saying that's not part of it at all, but I also think, maybe Ronnie Harrison's gambling there. He says he sees Herbert rolling right, sees the guy crossing, thinks that's the right play to make. But you have to remember that Justin Herbert's got a huge arm. He pulled up and he was able to throw the ball, whatever it was, 50 yards back across the field on that second touchdown. So, maybe it's a little bit of both where John Johnson thinks his guy's going to be there, so he plays it differently. But Harrison's kind of, trying to take something upon himself that he shouldn't have.
Yeah, I agree. So Baker Mayfield played significantly better. We kind of alluded to that. Here's Baker Mayfield talking about the way he played against the Chargers.
I thought we were efficient in the pass game. We just didn't make the plays we needed to. So, I'm not going to be happy about it. We didn't win the damn game. So that's truly all that matters to me. I'm going to be hard on myself regardless, and I didn't do enough today to win the game.
I know it's still really early in the season, but did this have a little bit of a playoff feel to it?
It did. In somebody else's house, obviously a loud environment. I thought, that's a team that's playoff caliber team that, we're probably going to see down the road. So we just got to take care of business and see what happens.
And Scott, it's kind of interesting. People, coming out saying Baker Mayfield cost them. There are so many things you can point to in that game. Yeah, Baker Mayfield didn't get it done late, but the defense didn't get it done. There are just a number of things. It's never one thing in a football game. Never.
No, it's not. And, when you list the things, is Baker on that list somewhere? Yes. I think he's probably way down that list behind about 10 defensive things, and probably even behind the punter. So, but I do think it's fair to talk about Baker in the final 2 minutes. And, can he go win a game when he has to? It didn't happen against Kansas City, and it didn't happen against the Chargers. Now, there are other factors. They're losing both games. They're out of timeouts. They had 2 backup tackles in. They don't get a call on the one. He wanted an interference on a Donovan Peoples-Jones play on the second last possession that they had, and maybe that erases the need to go down and score in the last 90 seconds. So there's a lot of factors, but it'd be nice, and I know the fan base would feel better if Baker had one of those games where he went down and won it, like that Cincinnati game a year ago quieted some doubts because he went and won the game. And I'm not saying the Browns are set up to do that a lot because they run it so much and, they rely on their defense a little bit, but you need your quarterback in these kind of matchups to go win games. And Justin Herbert played better. Baker played well, but Herbert played great. And Brandon Staley said after the game, if you're going to win a game like that, you need your quarterback to be a superstar, I think is a phrase he used. And he's right to a degree, right? You need your quarterback to play huge in the biggest moments, in the biggest games. And Baker did for a long time. He didn't at the end. I'm not even saying it's his fault, but you need to see that eventually against the better opponents, and then certainly when you get back to the playoffs.
Yeah, if you expect to be a team that's challenging for the AFC, there are going to be games that Baker Mayfield has to do that in the fourth quarter without questions. Scott Petrak and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. On the other side of the break, we will hear from Dan Orlovsky about Baker Mayfield in the fourth quarter. Also, Kevin Stefanski's play calling. We'll get into that a little bit. Sports for CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Back to new friends, new classroom, and learning new things. Back to wearing shoes, man, like real shoes. Back to rushing to class. Back to having questions. Lots of questions. Back to vending machine dinners. Back to too much caffeine and too late at night. But feeling like it was a night well spent. Back to pursuing your dreams and taking control of your future. Come back to go forward. Try C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns. Dan Orlovsky, who has come out and has been very supportive of Baker Mayfield, talked about the fourth quarter and what he needs to see from Baker Mayfield late in games.
To enter rare air in this league, you have to be the guy that when your team is in that one possession game in the fourth quarter, we're good. And Baker hasn't answered that yet. I actually asked Hembo to look it up just because I sometimes like when numbers match. In the fourth quarter, when it's a one-possession game, his QBR is 31st in the NFL. And that's from me, a guy who loves Baker and has had his back. The reality is what the reality is.
Scott Petrak, that's concerning, obviously. I don't think it's that he can't do it, but he hasn't done it yet.
That's true. And, I'm not making any apologies or excuses for Baker because he needs to do that, and that's what his role is, and that's why the number one overall draft pick. I do think the way the Browns play, right, running the ball so much and a lot of underneath stuff, and I think that might make it a little harder for Baker. All of a sudden, they say, "Hey, you got to go throw it every down at the end and go win us a game." When a guy like Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and even Justin Herbert, they're doing that all game long, right? They're dropping back, they're throwing it 45 times a game. It's kind of all on their shoulders, and it feels like you almost flip a switch. Is, hey, we're going to run it a bunch, and then Baker, we need you to go make 4 throws at the end. I'm not saying that's unfair to him. I'm just saying I think we need to think about that because this team is set up to win differently than other teams.
And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. But again, there are moments that Baker Mayfield will need to seize. Mayfield talked about, making big throws late in games yesterday post game.
Obviously, that's why we lost. So you didn't make enough plays to win the game, and that goes for everybody on our team. So we didn't do that. Like I said, we left too many points on the board in the first half. I don't think it would have been the same outcome with needing a touchdown to tie the ball game up late in the game if we had done that early on. So just got to do our job. We haven't played a complimentary football game yet.
And Scott, that's a really valid point. The defense has been great in a couple of games. The offense has been high-powered, bookending those, but they haven't played a game where the defense has showed up and the offense has showed up simultaneously.
No, and I think you can take some solace in that, right? Eventually it's going to happen. Everybody's going to play well together, and they should win big, and they should be able to beat the best teams in the league if the Browns play to their full potential. I think they're that talented, and I know that they believe they're that talented. But, Baker said it, and you said it, Dave, you are going to have to the quarterback's going to have to win games for you on that last drive or in those last couple of possessions. Go win a game. There's just too many close games in the NFL. For whatever reason, the talent's even, whatever it is, we see games come down to those plays every week. And it's a lot of them. And if the Browns play 17 games this year, do 10 of them come down to that? Maybe. So your quarterback's got to go win some of those. And he knows it. But it's got to be frustrating that this year, at least, he's 0 for 2 in those circumstances.
Well, a lot has been made of Kevin Stefanski and the play calling. So he was asked about, calling that draw on 3rd and 9 late in the fourth quarter. And in hindsight, would he have changed it? Here's Kevin Stefanski from today.
In hindsight, I definitely wish I did something different. This is where I have to put our guys in position to succeed. And I didn't do that there. And I'm sick about it. Definitely got too wrapped up in the previous play call, with the clock stopping and with, how that unfolded. And I got to put our guys in position, and I can't do that to our team.
And so there's a couple things here, Scott. He's referring to a potential pass interference call on the previous play that wasn't made. Now you do have 2 backup tackles. Blake Hance, James Hudson are your left and right tackles on that. And the other part of that is defensively, you've got your 4th and 5th cornerbacks who are starting. So there isn't a great option if you're calling a play in that circumstance for Kevin Stefanski. If you drop back Baker Mayfield, Joey Bosa is going to find, he's either going against Blake Hance or James Hudson. Take your pick. I don't like that matchup. If you're kicking the ball and giving it back, Mike Williams is going against your 4th and 5th corners. None of those are great options for the Browns.
No, you're right. And I think when you weigh all those in, that means Kevin Stefanski should have been more aggressive, because everyone felt that if the Chargers got the ball back, they were going to go score a touchdown. So the draw in that situation was surprising when it happened. It's still surprising now. But I like the fact that Kevin Stefanski went there and talked about what he was thinking, because, they run it on first down. I think the Chargers call timeout, so it's 2nd and 9. And then they called a play. They called an out and up to Donovan Peoples-Jones that they thought was going to work. And it did. The Chargers cornerback drills him into the sideline. There's no flag. They expected a flag. And then Baker actually thought there should be 2 flags, because then he threw to Higgins, and Higgins, there was contact and no flag there. So I think Stefanski really thought that play would work, number one, thought it was a terrible non-call, number 2, and then thought, well, okay, even if that doesn't work, Baker can scramble or he checks it off, and then the Chargers are going to have to call a timeout, so I'll have time to think about that 3rd down call. And then none of those things happen, and all of a sudden he's got to make a decision and goes with the draw. And he said it right after the game, so I think that's an honest moment, that he was worried about the protection of the tackles. But I think if he had an extra second to think about it, on 2nd down, when they threw it, the tackles did a good job. Baker had all day to throw, so why not trust him again on 3rd down? Trust your quarterback, trust your passing game, and try to go make a play. Even if you're on a screen, I like that call better than just a draw. The draw feels like a give up, and you can't give up in that situation when the odds are the Chargers are going to go down and score to take the lead again.
And the other thing I would say is Hunt had success on a 3rd and long the week before, which might have subliminally kind of figured into what Kevin Stefanski was thinking as he picked up that in a crucial situation against the Vikings. All right, Kareem Hunt, Malik Jackson talked about the fact that the Browns haven't lost consecutive games under Kevin Stefanski since he's been head coach. This is what they had to say, one of the reasons why.
We talk about it on Monday, and then after that, Tuesday, Wednesday, it's all about, this next opponent and how we're going to get ready to win and beat them. So we shift our focus. So we spend one day on the game, learning from, our mistakes.
I think we just understand what's up next. I think when it comes to Coach Woods, he does a good job of just we learn from what our mistakes were last week, and we fix them, and we go out there and do it better. So I think it's just understanding what beat us and going out there and making sure that, because it's a copycat league, so making sure it doesn't come to bite us in the butt again.
And it'll be put to the test here as 5-0, the only unbeaten team in the league, comes into First Energy Stadium next week is the Cardinals.
Yeah, I was trying to think back on all the, they only lost 5 regular season games a year ago, which was the toughest game to bounce back from, right? They got drilled by Pittsburgh, they got drilled by Baltimore early in the year, and they were able to bounce back from all those, right? But this is probably the stiffest test, given that the Cardinals are undefeated and the Browns are dealing with a tough loss. They got a bunch of injuries. So it's tough, but I think the players are right when they talk about just the mentality that Stefanski brings. Not only is it a 1-0, every week, and you have to forget about the previous week, but it's let's correct everything we did wrong. And that starts with himself, and I'm sure he'll call a better game in critical moments, right? They scored 42, so it's hard to argue with his play calling, except for those last couple possessions. And then you expect the defense not to have the same breakdowns that it had. So, there's a lot of this in the league where you kind of correct the things from the week before, but it is significant that they've never lost back-to-back games.
Yeah, and you know what? That's credit to the coaching staff, without question. All right, Scott Petrick and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we'll talk some of those injuries, plus a look at how good Greedy Williams has been when he has been on the field. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. Welcome back to Sports4CLE. We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrick from the Elyria Chronicle Telegram, as well as brownzone.com. So, Scott, when you look at the injuries the Browns have suffered, you got Denzel Ward out, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah had a throat contusion, traveled back late. Clowney with the elbow. Greedy Williams, who was filling in for the injured Greg Newsome. Jack Conklin left with the knee. Jedrick Wills, Chris Hubbard, and Greg Newsome were already out. Browns are banged up, and especially on the defensive side of the ball. This is not the week to be banged up on the defensive side of the ball with Kyler Murray and that basketball squad that they bring in that runs all over the place.
It's not. You need to pressure Murray, right? So you need your guys up front. Miles is banged up, even though he's playing through it. And you need your guys on the back end because Murray's going to keep plays alive forever and scramble and throw it deep. So you got to have guys that can cover for, multiple seconds back there. So it's quite a challenge. And, all injuries are bad, but it feels like they're really key spots, right? D-line, corner, and offensive tackle. Those are huge spots for any team, especially the Browns. And it makes it tough as a coach, to kind of scheme around those areas, right? Because sometimes those guys have to be on an island, whether you're rushing the passer, protecting the passer, or playing corner.
Of all the guys who left the game, who did? And if you didn't get a sense, that's fine. Did you get a sense of who seemed to be more significant and who you think might miss multiple weeks or who is in question, if you will?
Yeah, that's tough. Denzel Ward only played, I think it was like 7 snaps on defense. And he'd been, he was limited during the week with a neck injury. And then it looked like nothing really happened. I mean, he made a tackle and came up and was kind of, moving his neck around, and then left the game a play later. So, it doesn't look like anything severe, but the fact that you miss practice time and then miss almost the whole game, I'd be worried about that. He's your number 1 corner, so that means a lot. And then Conklin's been fighting a knee injury for much of the season. I don't know if this is the same one. It probably is, because it didn't look like anything significant happened to him either. It's the beginning of the 4th quarter, I want to say, and he's just pass protecting, and the knee looks a little funky, and then he has to walk off the field. So those are the 2 guys that I think I'd be most concerned about, because you need both of them, obviously.
The other one would be Greg Newsome. So Browns did not put him on IR, which would indicate they thought it wouldn't be more than 3 weeks. He's missed the last 2, so maybe that's I'm looking for a good sign. We've got Hopkins and that crew coming in, running all over the field. So anybody who can cover wide receivers well, Browns need coming up.
Yeah, I would think there's a chance, that at least he gets out there and practices this week. He worked on the side. You could see him, on the stationary bike and doing stuff over there. He's ruled out early last week, so that's never a great sign. But I wouldn't rule him out yet for this week. And you're right, they need bodies. Clowney, you mentioned elbow, and that's why he missed practice a week ago, but he didn't play Sunday because of a knee. Kevin Stefanski said it got sore before the game, and he wasn't able to go. So, he's had knee trouble in his past. It feels like it's kind of a week-to-week thing. How's he feeling? But, he's a guy with his injury history. You really can't – you don't want him to miss a lot of time, especially at this stage in the season. You would hope that he'd be able to, still be healthy at week 6.
And the other thing with a knee, keep in mind that's turf out there, and that will – anybody who has had knee issues, that stuff is nasty if you have any kind of knee issues. Well, Kevin Stefanski also addressed how he calls plays, specifically based on who's available on that offensive side of the ball.
You got to call the game that it's called for. Certainly understand that had some guys playing in positions where I need to make sure I call the game in a appropriate fashion, but that doesn't excuse not being aggressive when it's called for.
And again, Scott, that's something you kind of alluded to. Again, I absolutely love the fact that he is willing to admit that, and also takes into account, hey, we've got guys, our 2 tackles that are backup tackles don't do a couple of things well, so you don't call that. You do what they do well. You ask them to do what they can do.
Yeah, for sure. And, I think there is a balance there between, hey, we can't play handcuffed. We still have to attack. We have to be aggressive. We have to throw the ball. But knowing that you're not at the ideal spot. You don't have your starting left tackle and your starting right tackle. And even on that last drive, if you watch, Nick Chubb chipped Joey Bosa at least once, I think more than once on that last drive. There's other plays in the game where he really he loads up on Bosa before he goes out in the pass route and gives him a shot, just because you need to do something to neutralize those guys. Other teams do with Myles Garrett, even when their tackles are healthy, but it takes a guy out of the route, right? I mean, if you can go 5-man protection, you get 5 guys out, you can do more things as a coach, as a play caller, as a quarterback. But sometimes you have to make that adjustment and keep either an extra tight end and or a running back in, and that just affects how you call a game.
Yeah, and again, there's an awareness, and don't ask guys to do things they can't do. All right, Sam Penix via Twitter. Greedy Williams, second highest graded cornerback through 5 weeks of the season, 85.8. Before he left the game, he jumped off the screen. I thought Greedy Williams, I thought he played really well against the Vikings. I thought he was playing exceptionally well against the Chargers as well, Scott, before that shoulder kind of flared up on him.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And we hadn't seen Greedy, right? It's been a whole year, so you didn't know exactly what to expect. And I think at least he reminded me, I think probably everybody, that he's a starting caliber cornerback in this league. You know, he slipped on one play, was able to recover and make the tackle against Mike Williams. He gave up the catch, but I thought that showed a lot of athletic ability and awareness and able to recover and do that. He forced a fumble that set up the field goal at the end of the first half. He just really has shown up, and that's a position that you need incredible depth. And they have it when everybody's healthy, at least, and now they're into it, like Kevin Stefanski likes to say. But I think if you're a coach, you're not worried if Greedy's playing every snap at corner. I think he's shown the last couple of weeks that he's up to the task.
Yeah, and cornerbacks are same thing can be said as pitchers in baseball. When you think you have enough, go out and get a couple more because you're going to need them. The other thing that was, I knew it was coming, David Njoku's 7-catch, 149 yards, and a touchdown. I'm not surprised at all. There will be games where he goes out and just can't be stopped, and that was one of them against Chargers.
Yeah, he played great. To me, what's interesting is it felt like the coaching staff made it a deliberate point to get him the ball and get it to him early. And I think the week before, I'm not sure he had a target. So I don't know if the coaches said, hey, you know, we screwed up the week before. Let's make sure we involve David. Or they saw something in the Chargers, you know, on the Chargers film that said, hey, we can take advantage with not only the tight ends, but specifically David, right, and his athleticism. And he took advantage. He caught everything thrown his way, which hasn't always been the case in the past. I think he's gotten more consistent throughout his career. And then he showed, you know, strength and great speed on that long touchdown, right? He catches it, takes the hit, and breaks off. And then, you know, you thought maybe these DBs are going to catch him, and he's just too fast for, you know, DBs to catch him, which there's not a whole lot of tight ends in the league that run away from, you know, corners and safeties, or at least stay in front of corners and safeties.
Yeah, and he's going to be a matchup problem for defenses without question. Scott Petrick and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, more about Baker Mayfield and Odell Beckham Jr. Plus, we'll hear from Kevin Stefanski on a couple of missed calls by the refs. We'll also look ahead to the Cardinals. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a line. A long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrick from the Elyria Chronicle Telegram. So Keyshawn Johnson talked about Baker Mayfield and Odell Beckham on ESPN's KJM.
Baker Mayfield missed so many opportunities that was right in front of him, and you can't see it on television because the TV cameras are not panning to what you see. So I'm looking at it from a high view. I'm looking at it from up top, down. I can see everything that's going on, all 22 players. I can see it before it even takes place. Who should be getting the football? That last possession, Odell Beckham Jr. might have been open 55 times, okay? He didn't attempt to throw him the football. So it was kind of like, okay, Baker, I get it. But you got to get him the ball. Like, what are you doing? He tried to throw a Hail Mary for no reason at all.
And Scott, you know, hindsight 2020, but these guys are too talented not to be utilized and using that effectiveness of potential explosive plays.
Yeah. Odell needs to get the ball more. I agree with that. I thought the week before against the Vikings, Baker just missed him. Odell was running open plenty of times, and Baker just missed him. Yesterday, it was weird. There's only 3 targets to Odell. You know, a lot of times people say, hey, he's forcing the ball to Odell. I don't know if Baker's overcorrecting and, you know, trying not to force it to him. But it's strange that he would only get 3 targets, even though, you know, the Browns ran it 35 times. And Njoku had a big day. Donovan Peoples-Jones had a big day. I think Odell's drawing double coverage. But that still doesn't feel like enough attempts at Odell. And I would expect that to change next week. I think Keyshawn is probably a little exaggerating with the 55 times that he was open late. But, there was one play on that last drive where Baker threw a deep ball to Donovan Peoples-Jones. It felt like he could have hit Odell on a deep crossing route and maybe get down to the 35-yard line, and then you have a couple of shots at the end zone from there as opposed to the 50. So it's interesting, and I hate to fall back on the chemistry thing because I don't think that's entirely it. But obviously they're still not clicking, whether it's play calling, Baker, Odell, they're still not clicking at the level that I would expect them to.
Yeah, and quite frankly, if the Browns are going to be what they want to be at the level they need to be, having said that, we're talking about he didn't get the ball enough. They scored 42 points. That's enough to win 90% of the time in the NFL, maybe 95% of the time in the NFL.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, that's why some of the criticism feels, I don't know, forced or a little strange to me because, man, they scored 42, right? And it feels like you're nitpicking, and not you, but, people are nitpicking. I do think having Jarvis Landry back, whether it's this week when he's eligible to come off IR or whenever that is, I think that will help Odell. I think teams will pay more attention to Jarvis than they probably do Rashard Higgins or Donovan Peoples-Jones. And maybe just having Jarvis on the field will help Odell. But yeah, we're still early in the season. There's a lot of way to go. But I'd be shocked if Odell doesn't have a huge impact through multiple games as this season progresses.
Yeah, and it's coming. I said it a few weeks ago about David Njoku. There's a game where he's got 150 yards and a couple of touchdowns coming for Odell Beckham Jr. Well, without question, Browns fans have lamented this since the game ended. Refs missed a couple of calls. Here's Kevin Stefanski on that topic.
We talked about it. I'll obviously, like we do every week, have a discussion with the league on some of these plays. And listen, they're not going to get every play right, and I'm certainly not going to call every play right. And we're not going to execute every play right. It's going to be imperfect. But for our team, we are not going to leave it in the hands of the officials. We control a lot of that game, and we need to do better.
Couldn't agree with him more.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect attitude to take. And I understand the frustration of the players, certainly the frustration of the fans. I don't think one call or two calls change that game. I understand, if you make it's 4th and 4, they want, the Chargers get the call, they go and score. The game could change. Yes, but you also get 47. The Chargers might have kept scoring. They play it differently if they don't convert there. So I'm not willing to say that. I'm sure there's plays that went against the Browns that we just didn't notice or you're not focused on because they're not hurting your team. I think that's just the way it is. But I think Stefanski has to take that approach, and I think it's the right approach. You have to overcome it. Yes, you can be upset. Yes, you can argue with the officials at the time or say something to them and ask the league, why did they screw this up? But it does no good trying to blame the officials and trying to take any really blame off yourself or any responsibility off yourself, because in the end, it does lie with the players and the coaches.
All right, so the lone unbeaten team in the NFL is coming in Sunday, the Arizona Cardinals. What do you when you look at the Cardinals? What do you see? What do the Browns need to be aware of? What are they going to need to do to come away with a win and hand Arizona that first loss of the season?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to need to study the Cardinals more, but I know that Kyler Murray makes a bunch of plays with his arm and his legs. Right? I was never a huge fan, especially of short quarterbacks, but he's proven me wrong to this point. He's completing a bunch of passes. Going to the last week, he was first in the league in completion percentage. DeAndre Hopkins is obviously a big-time receiver. A.J. Green, it kind of resurrected his career after disappearing in Cincinnati for the last few years. Then on the D-line, they have Chandler Jones, who had that huge first game. They have J.J. Watt, right, who the Browns pursued in free agency before he chose Arizona. So they're a formidable team. They won a game. They had been scoring 30-plus. Yesterday, they only scored 17, but they still found a way to beat the 49ers. So it's going to be a tough one. There's no doubt about it.
The other thing, to keep in mind, Kyler Murray is a different type of athlete. I mean, he's like Patrick Mahomes, but might not throw it quite as well. But, man, he gets out of the pocket. He is hard to bring down. So there's another mobile quarterback, and probably the most more mobile quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, it's like playing Lamar Jackson a little bit, right? With that kind of, I don't think they run him as much as the Ravens run Lamar. I mean, there's they run a bunch of designed runs for him. Feels like Murray's or more off scramble. I mean, like I said, I need to go watch more to confirm that, but that's what it's felt like when they played him in the past. That he wants to throw, but then he'll run when he needs to. But he also doesn't feel like he takes a lot of hits. It's just like he'll be out there running and the defender will be coming at him and he nonchalantly steps out of bounds or, flips it to somebody or throws it away. Like, you can't really get a good shot on him, which really has to be frustrating for a defensive lineman like Myles Garrett, who's going to be exhausted trying to chase him around, and then you don't get the reward of pressuring the quarterback.
Scott Petrek from the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram. You can read him on brownzone.com on the internet as well. Scott, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Steve.
All right, Scott Petrek, Browns beat reporter. Remember, you can read him on the internet on brownzone.com. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, Tim Bielek from the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com will join us. We'll continue talking Browns, looking back at the Chargers, looking ahead to the Cardinals. Sports for CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Back to new friends, new classroom, and learning new things. Back to wearing shoes, man, like real shoes. Back to rushing to class. Back to having questions. Lots of questions. Back to vending machine dinners. Back to too much caffeine, too late at night, but feeling like it was a night well spent. Back to pursuing your dreams and taking control of your future. Come back to go forward. Try C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. Continue talking Browns, wrapping up that tough loss to the Chargers out on the West Coast. So after the game, Myles Garrett talked about the defense just didn't make enough plays to come away with the win.
It was tough, as you saw out there. We had some miscommunications, and we had some guys open. It really hurt us at the end there. And it's tough to get there when the quarterback's able to spot someone who was no one on them, but it's just something we got to go back and see. It's tough when you kind of force into the situation. It's a next man up league, but we gotta work on those situations and be prepared for stuff like that. And I don't fault them for not being prepared or not making those plays, but those guys are professional and stuff happens. What
challenge was it to be that clowny, and how did you come out of it physically? We saw you down for a little bit.
I'm gonna keep on grinding, keep on pushing. It's tough to be without JD because that helps them key a little bit more on me and the rest of us, and knowing he'll be back soon. And he's a force when he's out there, and I know I just have to step my game up a little bit higher when he's not out there, and I just couldn't make it when we needed to.
Let's welcome in Tim Bielek, reporter for the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. And Tim, a defense gave up 47 points when they gave up 13 total the two previous weeks. How surprised were you? And I know the Chargers are good offense, but how surprised are you that they were able to put 47 up on the Browns defense?
Maybe a little bit, but I think, the injury has had a lot to do with it. I mean, when you lose Denzel Ward in the first quarter with the neck injury, when you don't have Greg Newsome, when you don't have Jadeveon Clowney, when you have guys constantly kind of leaving the game at points due to injury, that takes its toll. And eventually it's always going to catch up with you, no matter how long you possess the ball in the NFL. When some teams have potent offenses, the Chargers among others, if you have a banged up defense and if you can't find a way to possess the ball, it's going to eventually catch up to you. And the other noticeable thing, I'm looking at the numbers. I mean, obviously the Browns, outgained the Chargers. They didn't turn the ball over. 3 times the Chargers got converted fourth down, and that doesn't include the pass interference that everybody's been talking about. Aside from that, there were 3 times the Browns had chances to get off the field against the Chargers defense and all offense, and all 3 times they couldn't do it. And those are huge momentum plays. I mean, there's a reason coaches go for it. They want to be aggressive. They want to seize momentum in this new age NFL. And Brandon Staley, he's a guy I've gained a lot of appreciation for in the last week. He was gutty, and he not only made those fourth down calls, but he made them count because they kept converting on fourth down. And when you do that, you make a defense that thinks, oh, we're 1 play from getting out the field. When that happens 3 times in a row, it's demoralizing. And I think over time, it just kind of became a snowball effect.
Yeah, it's an additional down that the defense has to account for. And they've had success being the Chargers doing that pretty much all season long. So the other thing that happened, there were a couple of plays where the coverage was blown. There were blown coverages on a couple of long touchdowns. Malik Jackson talked about that and how to correct it.
Just things that we just got to be crispier. We got to just be on the same page. And then I think that's all it is. I think when guys kind of go down for a second and guys need to step up and we need to be on the same page and understand, it's like if one guy goes down, it's like nothing happened when the next guy steps up. So I think it's just being on the same page and doing what we did Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and getting the job done.
And Tim, that goes back to what you alluded to. For lack of a better term, So Greedy Williams is basically the third corner. He started. When he went out, the Browns were playing with their 4th and 5th cornerbacks. Communication probably is going to suffer a little bit, although there were times where it was basically the 3 starting safeties kind of didn't have the communication going. So it was kind of a mixed pot of everything. They just need to be better. There's nothing else you can say.
Yeah, and I think when I thought of the charge, coming in, I would have figured the game plan for the safety was keep everything in front of you. Do not let them go deep, because we know Justin Herbert's got an extremely strong arm. He's extremely accurate in deep ball throws. The last thing you want to do is give him 2 wide open 40-some yard touchdown passes, and a 42-yarder and a 71-yarder. Those are things that can't happen. So your communication's got to be on point. And you mentioned the depth they had to go to in the cornerbacks. They had their top 3 safeties out there. And to see those blown coverages again and again on the same guy, you would think one is understandable. That happens in the NFL. You can do all the good defenses you want, but sometimes the offenses get you. 2 in a game is a huge problem. And that's the thing that the Browns have to work through this season is, their defense was great in games 3 and 4, but you have to learn to play well against very good quarterbacks if you want to get to the Super Bowl. They didn't do it in week 1 against the Chiefs. They didn't do it on Sunday against the Chargers. It's something they got to learn because the quarterback play isn't getting any easier. You got Kyler Murray in week 6, this coming Sunday. You've got 2 games with Joe Burrow. You got 2 games with Lamar Jackson. You got Aaron Rodgers on Christmas. You're going to have to play some really good quarterbacks down the stretch, and they're going to have to know how to defend those guys. It's good practice that they're at least learning that what they have to do, how they pretty much have to be 100% on the same page the whole time. It's just a matter of, when does that switch flip? When do they have that game where they go up against that great quarterback and make him look like an average guy?
And you mentioned Mahomes and Herbert, and those are 2 guys that the Browns are going to see later in this season if they get where they want to go come playoff time. We've talked a little bit about all of the guys that are missing. Ward, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah left the game. Clowney did not play. Greedy Williams left the game. Jack Conklin left the game. Jedrick Wills and Chris Hubbard and Greg Newsome were already out. Of all the guys missing, who do they need back the most with the 5-0, the only unbeaten team in the NFL coming into First Energy Stadium, the Arizona Cardinals?
I would probably, as much as I would want to say one of the corners, because you at least want to have one of your top 3 guys going against that offense, I think it's Jadeveon Clowney. And Myles Garrett alluded to it in his postgame, talking about just how important Clowney is to take pressure off the rest of that defensive line. You're going to need to find a way to get pressure with just 4 and find a way to keep Kyler Murray confined in that pocket as best as possible, because if you blitz, he can just run around you and burn you for a big long gain on the ground or throw it to one of his bevy of receivers. If you have Clowney out there, then you can still get pressure with 4 guys. You have a guy in Clowney who's capable of setting the edge at one of the end spots. You have to pick and choose who you're going to double team in those situations if you're going to double team one of those 2 guys. And it frees so many things up where they don't necessarily have to blitz to be effective. We saw just how important he was, in the first 4 games of the season. Even in the Vikings game, he only had 1 tackle, but he was still impactful. You need those guys closest to the line of scrimmage to be available, to be ready to go. Because if you can disrupt Murray, if you can make him play off schedule, if you can get him any bit uncomfortable, any little bit is going to help that secondary, I think. Because let's be real, you can have all the corners back you want. There is nobody that can cover DeAndre Hopkins one-on-one. That's just impossible. So that kind of is where I kind of, after thinking about it for a little bit, that's kind of where I landed, was on Clowney.
I agree with you to a certain extent. The guy that I'm curious about is Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is a guy that has a skill set that could potentially, I don't want to say he's going to follow Kyler Murray, but he is a guy that you might have kind of spy on him and make sure that if Kyler Murray gets out of the pocket, he has the athleticism to potentially run him down. Kyler Murray's a problem. I mean, he is more athletic running the football than Patrick Mahomes. He's probably a little bit faster and he's more elusive in the open field. When you watch him, he doesn't look big, but he never gets hit. I mean, he never takes a big hit, being Kyler Murray.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what makes him and that offense so special. Going back to when you were talking about Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, I think the hidden thing that sticks out, and they'll probably need this at some point if he plays on Sunday, is he's got a knack for punching the ball out in coverage. He did it a bunch at Notre Dame, including, I think it was a 4th fumble against Amari Rodgers in the Clemson game. With the receivers that the Cardinals have, not just DeAndre Hopkins, but you've got Christian Kirk, you've got Rondale Moore, who I absolutely loved coming out of Purdue. You've got AJ Green, who I know he's older, but as a complementary piece in that offense, he is still really good. So you're going to need all the guys that can cover that you can. JOK just seems to have ability to just be around the football. He hasn't quite forced turnovers yet, but you get the feeling that if he's healthy, if he stays on the field, if he continues to progress, that's just what he's going to do. And we know his coverage ability. So I agree with you. I think they'll need him for that, as well as, finding some way to control Kyler Murray and make him one-dimensional.
Tim Bielek from the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, Kevin Stefanski talks about playing a complete game, and the Bleacher Report suggests the Browns should trade one of their wide receivers. Sports4CLE will be right back. Let's stay with us.
Welcome back. Back to new friends, new classroom, and learning new things. Back to wearing shoes, man, like real shoes. Back to rushing to class. Back to having questions. Lots of questions. Back to vending machine dinners. Back to too much caffeine. Too late at night. But feeling like it was a night well spent. Back to pursuing your dreams and taking control of your future. Come back to go forward. Try C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns football with Tim Bielek from the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. All right, Tim, Bleacher Report suggests the Browns should trade Odell Beckham Jr., and basically what they're saying is if he's not going to be a part of the offense, they should try to trade him to get other pieces that could help them. I don't see any way that's going to happen, but they bring it up. So your thoughts on this?
I don't think he's going anywhere. I know last week I said I wasn't super concerned about the Baker-Odell connection. After this past game, I think it's kind of gone from a 3 to about a 5 out of 10, where I'm starting to get a little worried. you could talk about, all the reasons why it didn't work in 2019, with what happened with Freddie Kitchens and those problems with the offensive staff. 2020 with the pandemic when you can't really get together in the offseason. 2021, I know Odell's coming off the injury, but he looked healthy in camp. He looked good against the Bears in Game 3, but I think we're running out of reason to say that this just isn't going to work. And sometimes there is no legitimate answer. You see it all the time in basketball, for example, with the Lakers brought together Dwight Howard and Steve Nash to play with Kobe Bryant. And everybody thought that was going to be awesome, and they really did nothing. Sometimes there just is no explanation. It just doesn't work for whatever reason. Baker Mayfield and Odell Beckham Jr. by themselves are two outstanding players. They can do tremendous things separate of each other, and it makes perfect sense why you wouldn't make that trade. I'm sure in some cases people will make that trade again because the Giants really haven't done anything with that either. They've had one of the worst records in the NFL since the trade. So I look at Baker and Odell. Can they still figure it out? Yes, there's still time. But given, the problem, given that, they're still trying to go for a Super Bowl, they probably think Beckham is important to that, combined with the fact that you could just release him at the end of the season after the league year, and it costs you nothing of dead cap. I think he sticks around, but as for the future, it's murky, and you can't really point to one thing. I don't think it's a bunch of issues, or maybe it's just no reason at all. But it just simply just doesn't work, and sometimes in life that happens. I mean, it's just humans. It's just kind of how it is once in a while. It just doesn't work.
I still think at some point in time, there's going to be a game in the not too distant future where Odell has a bunch of catches for 150 yards and a couple touchdowns. I do think it's coming. I've been wrong before. I could be wrong without question. All right, Kevin Stefanski talked about something that Browns fans have been wondering. The Browns playing a complete football game. Here's the coach earlier today.
You have to find a way to win every Sunday or Thursday, whenever you're playing. You got to find a way. And sometimes the defense is going to carry us like they did the last couple of weeks. And then sometimes it's got to be the offense. And the offense and myself, we got to come through in those moments. But it's whatever the game calls for. Would we love for all three phases to be playing at their absolute potential? Yes, we would. And we're working real hard to make sure that happens.
So, Tim, let's talk a little late in-game play calling. Why do you think the Browns are having problems in that final 5 minutes of games?
It's tough to figure out. I mean, you can talk about play calling when it comes to Kevin Stefanski and how conservative he got at the end of the game, particularly that third down draw with about 3 minutes to go in the game. And that eventually gave the ball back to the Chargers. They end up scoring the game-winning touchdown largely because the Browns pull Austin Eckler into the end zone. But we also have to remember that this is the same Kevin Stefanski who a year ago in Dallas called an end around for Odell Beckham Jr. when they were leading in the game. He almost got tackled for about an 11, 12-yard loss, and he broke that for a touchdown in arguably one of the signature plays of the season. So it's kind of surprising that a guy who is one of the more creative play callers, one of the more creative play designers in the NFL, buttons it up in the last 5 minutes or so in the game. And, I think you can understand why. I mean, with two inexperienced tackles out there, you're just not sure what you're going to get out of them. You don't want either of them to make a mistake, but I do think this is kind of a pattern we're starting to see over the season. We saw it in Kansas City where they couldn't close it out. They had chances in the fourth quarter, but they couldn't move the ball until the final drive when Baker Mayfield gets pulled down, throws the interception, game's over. Even in Minnesota last week, they had trouble closing that game out. I know if Baker completes that pass to Odell, that goes for a touchdown. We're not necessarily talking about this anymore, but it's a worrying trend that I think he kind of needs to figure out. I think he certainly can. He's capable. We know he's going to make adjustments in season, and this isn't the finished product we're going to see from the Browns, far from it. But against the really good teams, I feel like this is the final step in the evolution of a good team is, can you beat the great teams on the road? And to do that, you have to be really good in the final 5 minutes. You have to have an aggressive mindset to be willing to take the game away instead of just trying to just run the clock out, find a way to just hold on and instead of just trying to take the game in your own hands. I think that needs to kind of be more of an emphasis going forward.
Yeah, I think, what you're getting at is that's the final step to becoming, a team that is challenging for an AFC championship as opposed to potentially a playoff team. Tim Bielik, reporter from the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. Tim, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much.
You got it. I'll catch you guys later.
All right, Tim Bielik, reporter for the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. That'll do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you again tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Scheduled guests, Mary Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com, as well as Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan. That is tomorrow at 4 o'clock. We will see you then on Sports for CLE. Have a great night, everybody.